name is Trelawney. I'm a relationship coach. I'm also a writer. I've written and produced a number of features for reality TV, and also I've written and produced several romantic comedies. What I really love to do is to watch reality TV and look at what's happening within the relationships of the cast members. Even though people tend to think that reality TV is very scripted and staged, actually, most of the time, these are real people that can only keep a mask up for a certain amount of time. So you can learn a lot from reality TV about human behavior. And it also helps us to think about how we would behave in different scenarios. We're all growing all the time. So nobody, even though you can do an awful lot of work on yourself to be evolved and enlightened, really stoic and sensible within relationships, nobody stays that way permanently without working on themselves. So I'm a great believer in whatever we can do to grow, to be better people to ourselves and to others is worthwhile. So for me, relaxing with a bit of reality TV is never a waste of time. So the first show that I'm going to talk about today is the Beckham's series on Netflix, Beckham. Now, there's a particular reason that I wanted to talk about this show, because when the story of David Beckham's, let's say, alleged infidelity first broke, he was living here in Spain on the mainland. I was here in Mallorca working for the English language press. And I remember very clearly one Sunday morning, my partner returning home and dumping a pile of newspapers on the table. And every single headline was an expose of David Beckham's alleged behavior. Very poor behavior towards his wife. Back in those days, that was nearly 20 years ago, you got all of your headlines and your gossip and your celebrity news generally from the printed press. So it was a really nice sunny day. So I remember reading through everything, and the stories that I was reading was so different from the facade that the Beckhams had created about their marriage, perfect love story, etc. Now, as we get older, we realize nobody has a perfect love story. What we can hope for is to meet somebody that we really like, that is very much a best friend and a wonderful companion, that we can trust, that we can laugh with, that we can work through stressful situations with, and that when things really don't feel right, we can sit down and we can talk about it rather than indulge in really hurtful, self-satisfying behavior. So, for example, if we don't feel we're getting the validation that we need from our partner, sitting down and having a conversation about that and working out perhaps how we can together feel more valued, rather than deciding that there's somebody really attractive and hot at work that fancies us, so let's just indulge our egos for a little bit with that. David Beckham seemed from the stories to be very much looking for validation from other women. He was here in Spain playing football, and Victoria had stayed in the UK with their children. I believe she didn't really want to mess about with their education, and I think she was very happy at that point living in the UK. So what happened when the stories broke? Well, Rebecca Luce was a personal assistant to both Victoria and David at the time. She was helping with translation. She was helping organise them in terms of buying a house, in terms of looking at schools. She was that kind of wonderful assistant that everybody could benefit from when we move to a new country and we're not too good at the language, that kind of thing. And she said that she liked Victoria. They got on very well. And she liked David. She thought he was a really nice guy. She alleges that pretty soon a line was crossed and that she and David were having an affair, let's say, and Victoria was completely in the dark. Now, once Victoria learned of what was going on, her and David very quickly joined forces, and it was very much as though the media was crazy, the public were deluded, the women that had come out, because it wasn't only Rebecca Luce, as happens with these things. Several other women had come out and said David had either been very flirty with them or they'd had some kind of fling with him, all allegedly completely behind Victoria's back. which is one of the cruelest things you can do to somebody who's in a relationship with you and believes that whatever happens, fundamentally, they can trust you and you're not betraying them. So David and Victoria very much joined forces to look as though everything was absolutely fine. These women were all just out to sell stories for money. They weren't telling the truth. Very quickly, they were pictured frolicking in the snow on holiday. Now, I cannot imagine how hard that must have been for Victoria. However she responded, it was a stress response. So the fact that she didn't instantly say, I stand with these women, I'm leaving my husband, he's a cheat, he's lied to me, I believe these other women. She didn't do that. And honestly, not so many women do that straight away because they're trying to process the shock. If we decide that Victoria didn't know anything about what was happening or the betrayals that were going on, she would have been in complete shock. So she would have been hers would have been a stress response coming from a place of hurt, confusion, anger. However, she was determined enough to protect their brand and protect their marriage, to go on holiday and lark about in the snow, jumping on David's back, etc. I can only imagine what was going on behind closed doors, but that was what was going on in public. And between them, they did kind of manage to ride out the storm because they very quickly relocated. They started a new life in America. They had more children, and they just very determinedly carried on with this. We are a very, very happy, unbreakable couple, and anybody that says anything else is a liar, essentially. They are a very powerful couple. They have more money than most of us. They have more resources at their fingertips. So although over the years, other stories have trickled out, particularly when they were in America, the stories really don't go anywhere. So I think most people have got to a point where they felt, honestly, they didn't really care what was going on in that marriage, whether David was faithful, whether Victoria was happy, whether it was all a complete facade. I don't think anybody really cared that much. Victoria's fashions, were doing really well. The kids were cute. Everybody seemed healthy and happy. And the public and the media seemed happy enough to say, fine, okay, we believe it. We bought into it. We're not hugely invested in it, but we've bought into it. So David then decides to release a documentary series about himself, self-titled, and it promises to be this kind of no-holds-barred expose of their real life. Now, I don't know if anybody watched the documentary series that Arnold, and I'm probably going to pronounce this wrongly, and I'm so sorry, Schwarzenegger? I'm not quite sure, but you know who I mean. He did a documentary series where he really did actually expose all elements of his life. And he talks about cheating on his wife really quite brutally because it was with somebody that worked within their home. And he actually had a child with this woman. And his wife had been, as far as one could make out, a very loyal, supportive wife who really loved him. They had children together. They'd been through so much together, and it was a terrible betrayal. But he did lay it on the table. He said how sorry he was, how terrible he felt. I don't think his life was ever the same afterwards, to be honest. And I did feel that he still really loved his wife, but he'd broken that relationship. But he was willing to hold his hands up. Things are quite different with the current documentary series that David Beckham has done. And although they do touch on the stress that was inflicted upon them, in their view, when they were here in Spain, again, David is taking a victim stance. It was the media, it was the public hungry for gossip, and he felt sick every day, and he couldn't believe the terrible stress that Victoria was under. Well, David, it's very likely that all of that was your fault, and all of the stress that your wife was under or has been under on an ongoing basis is your fault. And the thing is, we can all make mistakes, but it's about growing from them. And it takes a long time to become emotionally mature. It takes a really long time to stop looking for validation wherever you can get it, if you're that kind of person. So it takes a long time to be a truly loyal and honest partner for many, many people. Most people have made mistakes, and that's absolutely fine if you own them and if you grow from them and if you can accept and acknowledge the hurt you've caused and think about how you want to do things differently from now on. Well, the Beckhams have created a documentary where, again, the girls who allegedly have been involved with David Beckham are just kind of written off as fantasists, let's say, and the media and the public have given them a terrible time at times for no good reason. Well, the thing is, it's a different time now. Almost 20 years ago, they got away with that. Now, people are far more interested in others being accountable and not labeling others as liars or writing them off as fantasists when actually they're telling the truth. So Rebecca Lou's the woman at the center of this first kind of story breaking about David being unfaithful, has come out and said, look, if you wanted to bring this up, fine, I'd rather you didn't, but you should have at least tactfully not acknowledged what you did. Instead, you've made me look like a liar again, and you're playing the victim again, and I'm not having it. So she's come out with a story again, well, not a new story, but retelling the facts again. And I do have a feeling that because of the way things work these days, there will be other women coming out and standing up and saying, actually, you're trying to take the public for absolute fools. This isn't the truth. This isn't how things happened. So I'm not quite sure why David and Victoria thought this was a good thing to do right now. I think they've probably really started to feel completely untouchable and that they can portray an almost perfect marriage. And if, although they have, talked about how difficult things will be, there hasn't been a real acknowledgement of why or any acceptance that, perhaps that was actually David's fault. And perhaps David does actually need to work on emotional maturity even now, because he's still writing off people that at one point he tried very hard to make feel very special and to make believe in him. He's writing them off as lies and fantasists. So it will be interesting to see what happens there. And as I say, I'm not trying to say that anybody is a bad person. The way Victoria has behaved is the way a woman who desperately wants to hold on to her husband and life as she knows it and family often behaves. Now, whether she's truly happy or not is another question, and that's something for her to, to look at herself at different times, and maybe she does, and maybe she thinks, yes, I made absolutely the right choice. But for David, I think he would have been far more respected all round if he could have really told the truth about what happened. He doesn't have to bring anything up. He doesn't have to do a documentary about his life and tell us that he's going to be absolutely honest about everything. He could just lead a private life. They've got plenty of money. They can have anything that they want and give their children anything that they want. So for me, this is kind of a vanity project, very indulgent. And it will be interesting to see whether people really buy it. And if you do, that's absolutely fine. Or if people are looking at this couple, but particularly David, as people who still have that old, outdated idea of celebrity, which is, we'll just keep smiling and say everything's great and blame the press and blame the deluded fans, and everybody will believe we are perfect. So let's see. So the other show I wanted to talk about, and this is a different kind of slant, because the work that I do, I work with people in terms of romantic relationships, business relationships, and family relationships, and even friendships sometimes. So relationships are really important right across the board. Nothing happens easily, and particularly in work, that's a real juggling act a lot of the time. And people that we might not have particularly chosen to spend a lot of time with, we have to build trust and we have to build great communication with very quickly. Any working environment where that hasn't happened, you can feel it pretty much straight away. People are unhappy, things go wrong, nobody has a positive image of the company or the environment, which is a terrible situation to be in because we spend so much of our lives with the people that we work with. Obviously, now a lot of people work remotely, but actually that means that those working relationships really need to be even stronger and more rewarding, because that's a form of human connection, and we all need that. We all really need that within our day. So looking at the latest season of Belowdeck Mediterranean, which I love and is great escapist TV, but also really great for looking at the dynamics of relationships. I've watched the last couple of episodes, and if you've been watching, we have Sandy, Captain Sandy, at the helm. I love Captain Sandy. She does feel like a really capable, strong, and fair leader. But then we have Toomey coming on as Chief Stew. So unfortunately, Toomey had some visa issues and arrived late, which meant that Natalia, who was another member of staff, had to step up and become a leader for a short time. And then Toomey arrived to take over, to take her position of leadership on. Now, you can imagine in any working environment, that's a little bit of a tricky one. So you arrive, somebody who is now supposed to be working for you has been in the leadership role, has done things the way that they would like them done and feels really proud of it. And now they've got to listen to you saying, well, I would do this differently and that differently, and accept you as a leader. It's always going to be a slightly difficult situation. That person who stepped up as a leader but now has to step down has to be a really strong and fair personality to make that seamlessly easy for you. They're probably not completely. Unfortunately, Toomey made a huge mistake right at the beginning. So she had formed a friendship with Kyle, who knows both Natalia, the girl that needed to step up into the leadership position, and knows Toomey, though knows Toomey not quite so well. And Toomey spoke to Kyle in a really negative way about Natalia. Now, I think she was slightly provoked into this by Kyle, but the fact is, as a leader, when you're in a leadership position, you can never, ever, ever talk negatively about a member of your team to another member of your team. You have to more or less 100% expect that what you've said is going to go back, and it's probably going to go back a little bit worse. So for Toomey, who is showing so many signs of being a fair, hardworking, wonderful leader, to make such a big mistake right at the beginning is a real shame. She also, the negative message that she sent to Kyle about Natalia was in the form of text. So that's even worse because there's no context there. It can be just taken as a very harsh, dismissive text about somebody that she hadn't actually yet met. And although Natalia is quite a tricky personality, she's really a hard worker. And the two of them could have potentially made a great team if Toomey had just not felt that it was okay to kind of send a negative message out to another member of the team, and then to arrive with a little bit, tiny bit of a defensive attitude in terms of, we've done a great job, but there's lots of things I'm going to change. People hate that. You know, when you arrive as a new leader, one of the things that's going to upset your team very, very quickly is telling them that there are things that desperately need changing. You can think that, but vocalizing that straight away within kind of half an hour is always going to get people's feathers up. So the best thing to do when you enter a new position of leadership in whichever arena we're talking about, whether it's work, whether it's a social group, whether it's being accepted into a new family, that kind of thing, you need to just really tread lightly at the beginning. You want to assert your personality, and you want to you want to command respect, really, but it is about earning respect as well. So I'm really rooting for Toomey. I'm really hoping that Natalia is going to be able to accept her as a leader and show what an amazing person she can be, because she has a great sense of humor. She's really talented and she's really hardworking. However, if she's pushed, she loses all respect for authority, and she really kind of lets herself down by the way that she talks to people. She becomes very unprofessional. I really, really want these two to make an amazing team. And at the moment, Captain Sandy is doing that thing where she's like, okay, I'm not going to manage these two women as though they're children. I'm going to let them work this out. I'm going to stand back and see what's going to happen. But she's very close to deciding that this just isn't working, which would be a great shame for both of them, because both of them can do such an amazing job and continue to rise through the ranks within their profession. They do have an issue with Kyle, who is part of the team. Great personality, really warm, really funny, but a terrible stirrer. He knows them both, and if he keeps running back with bits of negative information back and forth, it's going to make it very difficult for those women to form a bond. So I think that needs to be managed by Tumi as well very quickly. I think, as in all relationships, what's important here is Tumi accepting things for what they are. So accepting the mistakes she made at the beginning, accepting Natalia's slightly defensive, fiery personality for what it is, and accepting Kyle's need to stir the pot a little bit now and again, but also accepting all the great things about her team and just working in the most authentic and honest way that she possibly can with them. We don't seem to have too much genuine romance building in this season yet. I really hope we do, because that's always quite fun to watch as well. But at the moment, what's really interesting about the current series of Belowdeck Mediterranean is how people accept a new leader and the big mistakes that you can avoid when you're in that position. When you need to come in, you need people to be open to giving you a chance and to accept you. So let's see what happens as we move along in that season. And let's see what happens in terms of the Beckhams. Is anyone else going to come out and say, no, excuse me, we're not going to listen to this. If you really want to tell the truth, you have to tell the truth. If not, please don't take up our time on Netflix. So I hope to speak to you again very, very soon. Have an amazing week, and I will be back next week with a new episode.